The judge's gavel struck the wood like thunder, echoing across the courtroom. "Case dismissed," he declared. And just like that, my entire life crumbled. The man who tried to erase me, who drugged me, lied about me, and even plotted to bury me alive for my billions, was now declared the victim. I stood frozen, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. My knees trembled as if the ground itself was betraying me. Reporters snapped photos. His lawyers smirked. And my husband, no monster, looked at me with that smug little smile that said, "I won again." But the truth was he hadn't won. Not yet. Because what he didn't know was that I still had one card left to play, one secret buried so deep that when it surfaced, it wouldn't just ruin him, it would destroy him. And so, when the judge's voice rang again, "Mrs. Carter, do you have anything further to say before we adjourn?" I opened my mouth, ready to unleash the storm. But before I tell you what I said, you need to understand how I got here. How a love story I thought was perfect turned into the deadliest trap of my life. So before I tear open his world, let me take you back to where it all began. But before we dive deeper, make sure you like, watch, and subscribe because what I'm about to reveal will twist your soul and make you question everything you believe about love, money, and betrayal. My name is Isabella Carter. I'm 36 years old, born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. My father, Henry, was a self-made billionaire in shipping, and my mother, Lorraine, was a soft-spoken woman who loved the piano more than the spotlight. I was their only child, the princess who inherited everything after my father passed when I was just 23. I wasn't spoiled. At least, I didn't think so. I just carried the weight of a fortune I didn't really know how to handle. That's when Daniel walked into my life. Daniel Carter. A man with warm hazel eyes, a voice that could melt ice, and the kind of charm that made every woman in the room lean just a little closer. I met him at a charity gala in New York. He wasn't like the other men chasing my money. He listened when I spoke, laughed at my nervous jokes, and didn't once bring up my father's company. He made me feel like a woman, not a bank account. Within a year, I was head over heels. And when he proposed with tears in his eyes, whispering, "I'll love you forever, Bella," I said yes. God, I wish I hadn't. The first years of our marriage were bliss. Candlelit dinners, vacations in Italy, walks on the beach behind our Charleston estate. I thought I'd finally found what my parents always wanted for me, a love not tied to wealth. He made me feel safe, protected, adored. But slowly things began to shift. Little things at first. He started asking more about the family accounts, about the board members in my father's company. He grew restless whenever I spoke to lawyers or accountants. And then came the first accident. It was a rainy night. I was driving home from a meeting when the brakes on my car failed. I spun out, the world a blur of lights and screams, and crashed into a ditch. Miraculously, I survived with only a broken wrist. The mechanic later said the brake lines had been tampered with. Daniel cried when he visited me in the hospital, swearing he'd protect me from whoever was trying to hurt us. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep inside, a whisper had started. A whisper that said maybe the man kissing my forehead at night was the same man loosening the bolts on my car. Still, I brushed it away. I loved him. And love makes you blind, doesn't it? But blindness doesn't last forever. Not when the shadows keep growing darker. The next year, my mother died unexpectedly.
Heart attack, they said.
But something felt wrong. She had no history of heart problems. And when I found out Daniel had been the last person with her, bringing her tea that night, I felt my stomach twist into knots. I wanted to confront him, but how could I accuse my own husband of killing my mother without proof? Instead, I carried that suspicion like a stone in my chest. That's when the drugs started. Subtle at first. I'd feel groggy after meals, my vision blurring, my thoughts muddled. Some days I couldn't even remember entire hours. Doctors said it was stress. But I knew stress didn't make your lips taste bitter after every sip of wine. One night, I woke up on the bathroom floor, my body shaking uncontrollably. Daniel was standing over me, phone in hand, pretending to call 911. Pretending to save me. And as he held me, whispering, "Don't worry, Bella, I've got you," I realized something chilling. He wasn't trying to save me. He was waiting for me to finally stop breathing. But I didn't. And that, I think, is when he started to panic. Because the harder he tried to erase me, the more I survived. And the more I survived, the more dangerous I became to him. I thought about running. I thought about telling the police. But then, Daniel beat me to it. One morning, police stormed into our house, dragging me out in handcuffs. He had accused me of trying to poison him. He had planted evidence, bottles, receipts, doctored text messages, all pointing at me. Suddenly, I wasn't the victim. I was the monster. And in that courtroom, as the gavel fell, I realized I had been outplayed. The man I loved had turned me into a villain in the eyes of the law. But he underestimated me. Because villains, they always come back for revenge. And that was the exact moment I made a vow. If the world thought I was the criminal, then I would give them a story so dark, so twisted, that Daniel Carter would regret the day he ever tried to erase Isabella Carter. The cameras flashed. The crowd murmured. The judge stood to leave. And as I turned toward Daniel with fire in my eyes, I whispered 3 words that made his smile vanish. "I know everything." And that was when his face turned pale. The words slipped out of my mouth like a blade, slicing through his confidence. "I know everything." For the first time, Daniel's smugness cracked.
His jaw tightened.
His eyes twitched, darting toward his lawyer. He tried to mask it with a chuckle, but it was too late. I had seen fear flash across his face. The reporters noticed too. Cameras zoomed in, eager for reaction. The judge, annoyed, rapped his gavel again. "Order in the court. Mrs. Carter, this case is adjourned. Any further allegations will be handled separately." Handled separately. Those 2 words gave me hope. Because separately meant privately. And privately meant I could strike where it hurt most. As we left the courtroom, Daniel brushed past me, close enough for me to smell his cologne, the same one he wore on our wedding day. He leaned in, his lips barely moving. "You're finished, Bella. Nobody believes you. Not even God can save you now." I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled sweetly and whispered back, "Then you should pray. Because I'm not God." His face hardened, and for the first time in years, I felt the upper hand sliding back into mine. But before I tell you how I turned the game, let me go back to where the first cracks in his mask began to show, because the truth of Daniel's evil was much darker than the courts, or even I, had first realized. After my mother's death, the mansion in Charleston felt like a tomb. Daniel insisted we move to New York, closer to his business opportunities. At first, I agreed, thinking a fresh start would heal me. But once we got there, everything changed. I wasn't the wife anymore. I was the prisoner. Daniel had this way of wrapping his control in velvet. He would say, "Bella, don't worry about the bills, I'll handle everything," as if he were protecting me. Or, "Bella, you don't need to stress yourself with the board meetings, you should rest," as if it were love. Slowly, I realized he was cutting me off from everything my father had left me. Lawyers I trusted were replaced with his men. Accounts were redirected. Every penny that was once in my hands slid into his grip. I thought I still had my freedom, until one night I tried to book a flight back to Charleston without telling him, only to find my passport gone. "Must have misplaced it," he said with that grin. But I knew better. It was the night after that when I found the first real piece of evidence. I had been feeling sick for weeks. Nausea, dizziness, blackouts. I suspected he was drugging me, but had no proof. Until one evening, when Daniel left for a meeting, I dragged myself to the kitchen for water. That's when I noticed a tiny bottle tucked behind the spice rack. My hands shook as I pulled it out. It was unlabeled, but the powder inside wasn't sugar, salt, or anything I recognized. I took it to a private doctor the next morning, without telling a soul. His face turned pale when he tested it. "Mrs. Carter, this is a sedative. In high doses, it could be lethal." I remember the air in that room disappearing. My knees buckled. My stomach churned. My husband wasn't just controlling me. He was preparing to erase me. And worse, he was patient. I didn't run home screaming. I didn't confront him right then. Instead, I started documenting everything. I began keeping a hidden journal, recording dates, times, meals, and every dizzy spell. I hid tiny cameras inside picture frames. I stored backup copies of my files in a safe deposit box he didn't know about. Because if I confronted him too early, I knew what would happen. I wouldn't live long enough to finish the sentence. But Daniel, clever as he was, grew suspicious. He started watching me more closely. He hired staff that only answered to him. He had friends in law enforcement, men who smiled in my face but whispered behind my back. I was walking in a house full of snakes, waiting for one to strike. And then came the night that changed everything. I had just returned from visiting my doctor again, making sure my hidden tests were locked away safely. When I entered the mansion, I noticed something strange. Silence. Too much silence. No TV. No staff. Not even Daniel. I stepped into the kitchen and there it was. A wine glass. Half filled. I froze. My lips trembled. He knew. Behind me, a voice whispered, low and cold. "Why don't you drink, Bella?" I turned slowly, and there he was, leaning against the counter, that same charming smile plastered across his face. Only this time, the charm didn't hide the darkness in his eyes. "After all," he continued, pushing the glass closer to me, "I made it just for you." My heart slammed against my ribs. My hands went clammy, but I forced myself to smile, as if I hadn't seen the powder bottle in the kitchen days earlier. As if I didn't know the truth. "Later," I said softly, pretending to yawn. "I'm too tired now." Daniel's smile faltered, but he didn't press. Instead, he lifted the glass himself, swirled it gently, and placed it back on the counter. "Suit yourself," he murmured, then walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed a small bag, hid my journal inside, and locked the door to my room. My hands shook as I stared at the ceiling. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. But before I could escape, fate intervened. The next morning, the police stormed the mansion. Not for him. For me. Daniel had gone ahead of me, crafting his masterpiece of lies. They dragged me out, shouting accusations of attempted murder. My face was plastered across every news station by evening. Heiress tries to poison husband for billions. And worst of all, he had planted the same bottle I found in the kitchen inside my closet. I screamed. I cried. I begged them to listen. But evidence is louder than tears. By the time I sat in that courtroom weeks later, Daniel had painted himself as the loving husband who survived my greed. And the world believed him. But what he didn't know was that I had my journal, my recordings, my secret files. He thought he erased me. But I had been writing my resurrection all along. And when I whispered I know everything in that courtroom, I saw the cracks begin to form in his empire of lies. But revenge isn't instant. It's patient. It's sharp. And mine was only beginning. That night, after the trial, I returned to my empty hotel room. My hands trembled as I unlocked the safe where my evidence was stored. One by one, I laid out the files, the recordings, the photos. Proof that the man America thought was a victim was actually a predator. And just as I was ready to make my next move, I heard a knock at the door. 3 sharp knocks. I froze. It was past midnight. No one knew I was here. Slowly, I walked to the door, peering through the peephole. And my blood ran cold. It was Daniel, standing there, smiling. Through the peephole, Daniel's face stared back at me, smiling as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just dragged me through hell in that courtroom. His hazel eyes glowed under the dim hallway light, calm but calculated, the look of a man who never knocked unless he already had a plan. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled against the door. I didn't move. Then came the voice. "Bella," he said softly, almost playfully. "Open up. We need to talk." Every muscle in my body screamed don't. I had seen this trick before. The gentle tone, the warm smile, camouflage for the monster hiding underneath. I stayed silent. He knocked again, slower this time, like a predator tapping its claws against glass. "You think you can run from me?" His voice dropped lower, sharp enough to slice air.
I own you, Bella.
Court proved it.
The world believes me.
But you, his tone shifted again, almost mocking. You still think you're safe. My heart pounded so loud, I thought he might hear it through the door. I backed away, step by step, clutching the folder of evidence tighter in my arms. And then, silence. No more knocking. No more words. Just the faint sound of footsteps fading down the hallway. I stayed frozen for almost an hour, staring at that door, waiting for him to come back. When I finally looked through the peephole again, the hall was empty. He was gone. Or at least I thought he was. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at the desk, staring at the journal I'd kept, flipping through pages of my own handwriting that spelled out my slow descent into his trap. Every bruise, every dizzy spell, every accident carefully written down. Proof of who he really was. And for the first time, I realized something that cut me to my core. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my father's legacy, for my mother's memory. If Daniel destroyed me, he destroyed everything my family had built. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to stay strong. My mother always told me, Isabella, storms don't break strong trees. They just show which ones have deep roots. And I was done bending. The next morning, I contacted the only person I still trusted, Detective Alan Reeves. Alan had known my father, had worked small cases for our family years ago, and had been quietly checking in since Daniel's rise in my life. If anyone could help me, it was him. We met at a diner on the edge of town. I slid the journal across the table, my hands shaking as I watched him skim through the entries. His face hardened with every page. Jesus, Bella, he muttered. If this is real, you're sitting on a bomb. It is real, I whispered, leaning closer. But if I go public, Daniel will bury me before it ever hits the news. He's too powerful, too connected. Alan closed the journal and looked at me with steady eyes. Then we don't go public. We go quiet. We build a case he can't touch.
But you've got to be ready, Bella.
This isn't about proving you innocent anymore. It's about surviving long enough to expose him. His words sent a chill down my spine. For the first time, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was planning a war. But wars require strategy. And while Alan gathered his team, I focused on moving carefully. I changed hotels. I used burner phones. I avoided places Daniel might expect me. Each step felt like walking a tightrope above fire. One wrong move and I'd fall straight into his hands. Yet even in hiding, I felt his presence. Anonymous notes slipped under my door. A shadow of a car following me at night. A hotel clerk once accidentally gave my room number to a stranger. Daniel wasn't chasing me. He was hunting me. One night, I sat alone in my new hotel room, staring at the evidence spread out on the bed. Photos. Medical records. The hidden camera recordings. Enough to destroy him, if I lived long enough to use them. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind burned with a single thought. He thinks I'm cornered. But he doesn't realize I still have teeth. And then, just as I began to drift into uneasy sleep, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Bella. His voice.
Smooth. Calm.
I froze. You really think your little detective friend can save you? My chest tightened. My mouth went dry. He knew. Somehow he knew about Alan. You've always underestimated me, Daniel continued, his tone dripping with venom. And now Alan will pay the price for your stupidity. The line went dead. My heart dropped into my stomach. I grabbed my coat and the folder of evidence, rushing out the door. The city blurred as I sped toward Alan's office, praying I wasn't too late. When I arrived, the building was dark. Silent. My hands shook as I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, iron, sharp and heavy.
Blood.
And then I saw him. Alan Reeves.
My only ally.
Lying on the floor, motionless, a crimson pool spreading beneath him. The sight of Alan's body on the cold floor nearly ripped the air from my lungs. My scream lodged in my throat, trembling hands pressed against my mouth as tears burned down my cheeks. No, 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 no. My knees buckled, and I collapsed beside him. His eyes, once steady and full of fire, were glassy and empty now. Alan Reeves, the one person who believed me, who dared to stand against Daniel, was gone. The metallic smell of blood filled the room, sharp and suffocating. I reached for his hand, but it was already cold. A note lay beside him, written in Daniel's neat handwriting. Just 5 words. Next time it's you. My body shook with rage. My vision blurred with tears. I wanted to scream until the walls cracked, until the whole city heard me. But instead, I forced myself to swallow the pain. Because if I broke now, Daniel had already won. Still, grief came in waves. For a moment, I curled up beside Alan, my chest heaving with sobs. He had tried to save me. He had risked his life because he believed I deserved the truth. And Daniel had slaughtered him for it. That night, I swore I wouldn't just destroy Daniel. I'd make him feel every ounce of pain he had carved into my life. I wiped my tears, grabbed Alan's phone from the desk, and pocketed the note. Then, with trembling hands, I dialed 911. When the police arrived, I told them I found him like this, that I came by to drop something off and stumbled into the scene. They questioned me, their eyes sharp with suspicion. After all, wasn't I the woman accused of poisoning her husband? But they couldn't tie this to me. Not yet. They let me go, though I could feel the doubt in their stares as I walked out into the night. And that's when the paranoia settled in. Every shadow became Daniel. Every footstep behind me was his. Every face in the crowd felt like one of his spies. I switched hotels again. Burned another phone. But no matter how far I ran, the fear followed. Daniel was always one step ahead. Always watching. Still, I clung to one thing: the evidence. My journal, the recordings, the tests. They were all I had left. Without them, I was just a grieving widow in the making, hunted by the man I once loved. But evidence alone wasn't enough anymore. I needed allies. And Alan's death had taught me one brutal lesson: trusting the wrong person could be fatal. For days, I locked myself in that hotel room, combing through Alan's notes, his files, his contacts. Buried deep in his emails, I found a name he had underlined twice: Rachel Hayes. A journalist. Alan must have been planning to bring her in. My heart raced as I debated it. Journalists were risky. They wanted stories, headlines. But right now, I needed a voice louder than Daniel's. So I called her. When Rachel picked up, her voice was cautious, skeptical. "Isabella Carter?" "Yes," I whispered, glancing around the empty room. "I need to talk to you. Privately. It's about Daniel." There was silence on the line. Then, softly, "Meet me tomorrow. Noon. Washington Square Park. Don't bring anyone." I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Alan's lifeless face, Daniel's cruel handwriting, the endless warnings in my mind. This could be another trap. But if Rachel was real, if she was truly willing to listen, maybe I had one last chance to expose him. The next day, I arrived early. I sat on a bench, the evidence folder tucked inside my bag. My eyes scanned the park like a hawk. Families played. Couples strolled. A man strummed a guitar. Everything looked normal, too normal. Then I saw her. Rachel Hayes. Short blonde hair, sharp eyes, moving with the quick stride of someone who trusted no one. She sat beside me without a word, her gaze fixed forward. "You said you have something on Daniel Carter," she muttered under her breath. I nodded, sliding the folder closer to her. "This is everything. The drugs. The accidents. My journal. He killed my mother. He killed Alan Reeves. And now he's coming for me." Rachel opened the folder, flipping through the pages. Her eyes widened as she skimmed the hidden camera stills, the doctor's notes, the receipts. "This is huge," she whispered. "But you realize if I run this story, your life will be ripped apart. The media will devour you." "My life's already ripped apart," I shot back. "I just want him exposed before he buries me, too." For the first time, Rachel turned to face me fully. There was no pity in her eyes, only respect. "Then let's burn him." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone anymore. Maybe together we could finally bring him down. We parted ways, agreeing to meet again once she verified the documents. My heart raced as I walked back to the hotel, clutching my bag. For the first time since my father's death, I felt like I was carrying a weapon more powerful than money, the truth. But hope has a cruel way of turning into horror. When I returned to my hotel, the door to my room was ajar. My chest tightened. Slowly, I pushed it open. The sight froze my blood. Everything was destroyed. My clothes ripped apart. My belongings smashed. My laptop in pieces. The safe cracked open, and pinned to the wall with a knife was a photo of me, sleeping. Written across it in Daniel's handwriting were 4 words.
I'm already inside, Bella.
The photo pinned to the wall sent my heart plummeting into my stomach. My face. My sleeping face. The thought made bile rise in my throat. He had been in the room, watching me, breathing the same air. And I hadn't even known. The message screamed louder than any words. You'll never be safe, Bella. I backed out of the wrecked hotel room, my pulse hammering so violently I thought it would burst through my chest. My legs shook, but I forced myself down the hall, into the elevator, out onto the street. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to wake me from the nightmare that was my life. For a moment, I wanted to collapse, to surrender, to let the fear swallow me whole. But then I remembered Alan's lifeless eyes, my mother's sudden heart attack, my father's empire being bled dry in Daniel's hands.
No.
If I gave up now, Daniel had already won. I grabbed a cab and didn't stop moving until I was halfway across the city, checking into a rundown motel where nobody would think to look for me. The sheets smelled of cigarettes, the air conditioner rattled like it was choking, but for the first time in days, the silence felt real. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my phone. Rachel. She was my only link now, my only shot at getting the truth into the world. I texted her. He knows. He's watching me. Please hurry. No reply. I tried again. Rachel, please tell me you're safe. Nothing. My stomach twisted. I told myself she was just busy, maybe already digging through the evidence. But deep down, I felt the same chill I had felt before Alan's death, the sense that Daniel was always 2 steps ahead. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed and into survival mode. I bought a cheap burner phone, stocked up on cash, and moved the rest of my evidence into 3 separate hiding places across the city. If Daniel wanted to erase me, he'd have to erase me 3 times over. But that didn't stop the nightmares. Each night, I saw his shadow in the corners. Each morning, I checked the locks twice, 3 times. I barely ate. My body was weak, but my rage was stronger than ever. 2 days later, Rachel finally called. Her voice was urgent, shaky. Bella, we need to meet.
Right now.
This story is bigger than I thought. He's dirtier than even you know. He has politicians, judges, police. The man's untouchable. My chest tightened. Then what do? We go bigger, she said. This doesn't hit a newspaper. It goes national. Television. Leaks online. Somewhere he can't control the narrative. Hope flickered in me again. Finally, a way to rip his mask off. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the Lower East Side.
Noon.
I arrived first, sitting in a corner booth, my hood pulled low. My eyes darted to every face that walked in, every stranger who lingered too long near the door. Then Rachel arrived, clutching a laptop bag tight against her chest. She slid into the booth, her eyes wide and frantic. I've been followed, she whispered. He knows about me too. He's trying to shut this down. I leaned forward, my voice trembling. Then we leak it now. Everything. Tonight. She nodded, pulling out her laptop. I've got enough here to start the fire. Once it's out, he can't stop it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally ending. But fate has a way of striking hardest when you think you're safe. Because the next moment, the cafe door burst open. 3 men in black rushed inside, masks over their faces. One of them shouted, "Down. Everyone down." Panic erupted. Customers screamed, diving under tables. Coffee spilled, cups shattered. My blood ran cold as one of the masked men's eyes locked onto mine. Rachel's hand gripped my arm, her voice trembling. "Bella, it's him. He sent them." Before I could react, one of the men pulled a gun from under his jacket and aimed it directly at us. The last thing I heard before the cafe exploded into chaos was a single, chilling command. "Take her alive." The gun's metallic click echoed louder than the screams. The masked man lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight it burned my skin. Rachel shrieked beside me, clutching her laptop like it was her last lifeline. "Run," she screamed. But there was nowhere to run. Another man blocked the exit, shoving panicked customers against the wall. The third smashed his fist into Rachel's face, sending her crashing to the ground. Her laptop clattered across the tiles, sliding under a table. "No," I shouted, clawing at the man's arm as he dragged me toward the door. "Stay quiet, princess," he hissed. "Boss wants you breathing. For now." My blood froze.
Boss. There was no doubt who that was.
Daniel. Outside, a black SUV waited with its engine running. The back door flew open, and before I could scream again, I was shoved inside. My head hit the seat, stars bursting across my vision. The door slammed shut. The SUV screeched away, leaving the cafe chaos behind. Through blurred eyes, I caught one last glimpse of Rachel crawling toward her laptop before the world outside became a smear of colors. The men sat silent, guns in their laps, their eyes hidden behind masks. I tried to steady my breathing, but my heart thrashed like a wild animal. I knew where this road ended. Daniel didn't want a wife anymore. He wanted a corpse. The ride felt endless. Finally, the SUV slowed, pulling into a gated property on the outskirts of the city. As the gates closed behind us, my chest tightened. Daniel's lair. The men dragged me out, shoving me toward the mansion. It wasn't the home we once shared in Charleston. This was different. Cold. Sterile. A fortress. The heavy front doors opened, and there he was. Daniel Carter, dressed in a tailored suit, as if he had just stepped out of a magazine, not a crime scene. His smile was the same charming one that once melted me, but now it looked like the grin of a wolf. "Bella," he said warmly, spreading his arms as if welcoming a long-lost lover. "Finally. Home." I spat at the floor between us. "You call this home? It's a graveyard." His eyes flickered with irritation, but he recovered quickly, stepping closer until I could see the shadow of stubble on his jaw. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face with mock tenderness. "You could have made this easy," he whispered. "You could have just played the role. The doting wife. The silent partner. But no, you had to fight." And now he stepped back, his smile sharpening. "Now you'll learn what happens to women who don't listen." The men shoved me into a chair. Ropes dug into my wrists as they tied me down. My chest heaved, but I forced myself not to cry. Not in front of him. "Do you know what your problem is, Bella?" Daniel said, pacing slowly around me. "You think truth matters. That evidence matters. But power rewrites truth. The judge, the police, the media, they all believe me because I own them." He leaned down, his lips close to my ear. "And soon, no one will even remember your name." My pulse roared in my ears, but my rage drowned out the fear. I met his gaze, my voice low and steady. "You've killed Alan. You've silenced my mother. But you can't erase me, Daniel. I kept everything. Every file. Every recording. If I don't walk out of here, that evidence will." For the first time, his confident mask slipped. Just a flicker, but I saw it, the flash of doubt. "You're bluffing," he snapped. I smirked, despite the ropes cutting into my skin. "Am I?" His jaw tightened. He waved a hand, and one of the men stormed out. Daniel straightened his tie, regaining composure. "We'll see soon enough." He walked toward the window, his back to me. "You know, I did love you once. Maybe I still do, in a way. But love doesn't pay for power. And power is all that matters." I couldn't hold back the words that burst from me. "You're a coward, Daniel. My father built an empire, and you I spat the words like poison. You'll die trying to steal what you'll never deserve. He turned slowly, his eyes blazing. In 2 strides, he was in front of me, his hand snapping across my face. The sting burned hot, but I refused to give him my tears. Instead, I smiled. A bloody, defiant smile. "That's the best you've got?" He stared at me, his chest heaving. For a moment, I thought he might strangle me right there. But instead, he laughed.
Low.
"Dangerous. You really don't get it, Bella," he murmured. "You're not the hunter here. You're the bait." Before I could process his words, the man who had left earlier returned, carrying a laptop. He placed it on the table in front of me. Daniel leaned in close. "If you have evidence, it's out there, right? Hidden somewhere. Backups. Maybe with someone. But what if I told you? I already know where it is." My stomach dropped. The man opened the laptop, pulling up a live feed. My blood turned to ice. The screen showed Rachel, bound to a chair.
Bruised. Gagged.
Daniel smirked, his voice dripping with triumph. "Did you really think you were clever? That little journalist friend of yours sings when she's scared. And now, she's the key to finding everything you've been hiding." I shook my head violently, my voice cracking. "Don't you touch her. This is between you and me." He crouched in front of me, his eyes burning into mine.
"No, Bella.
This is between me and the billions. You were just the pretty obstacle in the way." The screen flickered as Rachel's muffled screams filled the room. My chest heaved with fury, helplessness clawing at my throat. Daniel straightened, his smile sharp as a knife. "So here's the game. You give me everything, all your little secrets, or I'll make sure Rachel's screams are the last sound you ever hear." And as Rachel's terrified eyes stared at me through the screen, I realized the trap had just snapped shut. Rachel's muffled screams clawed through the speakers, each sound like a blade slicing into my chest. I yanked against the ropes until my wrists burned raw, but nothing gave. My best friend, my only ally, was tied up, bruised, broken. Because of me. Daniel stood in front of the screen like a king in his throne room, savoring every second of my pain. His men loomed behind him, guns hanging loosely at their sides, waiting for his command. "Here's how this works," he said coolly, tapping the laptop lid. "You give me access codes, account numbers, offshore banks, everything. And in return, Rachel walks away untouched. Refuse, and," he gestured casually at the screen, "she dies screaming." My body trembled, but my mind sharpened like glass. I thought of Alan, his body left lifeless. I thought of my mother, silenced by Daniel's lies. I thought of every tear, every humiliation, every moment he tried to erase me. And I thought of Rachel, the one person who never walked away when things got ugly. "I'll kill you before I let you touch her," I spat, venom lacing my words. Daniel chuckled softly. "Oh, Bella. Still pretending you're dangerous. The truth is you're powerless. And powerless people always sacrifice someone else to survive." His arrogance made my rage boil. He thought he had already won. He thought I was cornered. But he underestimated one thing. My father didn't just leave me billions. He left me his mind, his cunning, his ruthlessness when pushed too far. I forced my breathing to slow, schooling my face into fear. "Fine," I whispered. "I'll give you what you want." Daniel's eyes glittered with victory. He snapped his fingers, and one of his men shoved a notepad in front of me. A pen pressed into my hand. My fingers shook, on purpose. Let him think I was weak. I scribbled a set of codes onto the page. Numbers, letters, account details. To Daniel, it would look real enough. But I wasn't giving him money. I was giving him a bomb. Encrypted within those codes was a digital dead man switch, one Rachel and I had set up weeks ago. If anyone tried to access those accounts without the right clearance, everything we had collected, every file, every recording, every transaction tying Daniel to bribes, murders, and money laundering would blast across the internet. Government servers, journalists, social media, everything. I slid the paper across the table, forcing my hands to tremble. "Just don't hurt her. Please," Daniel grinned like a shark. He plucked the paper from my hands, holding it up to the light as if it were a priceless treasure.
See?
That wasn't so hard, was it? He handed it to his man. Run it.
Now.
The man disappeared into another room, laptop bag slung across his shoulder. My heart hammered against my ribs. In minutes, Daniel would learn the truth. The only question was, would I still be alive to see his empire burn? Daniel leaned against the edge of the table, studying me with predatory curiosity. You know, Bella, you'd make a remarkable villain if you weren't so sentimental. But it's that weakness that ruins you. He brushed his thumb across my jaw, mock affection dripping from the gesture. You care too much. And caring makes you easy to break. Before I could spit back, the man returned. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. Boss, he stammered. Something's wrong. Daniel's smile faltered. What do you mean wrong? The man held up his laptop, screen glowing. The moment I logged in, it triggered something. Files are spreading. Emails, videos, thousands of them. It's everywhere. Sir, it's... The man didn't finish. Daniel's fist slammed into his jaw, sending him sprawling. Rage twisted his features into something unrecognizable. He grabbed the laptop and hurled it across the room, where it shattered against the wall. You, he roared, whirling toward me. His face was crimson, veins bulging in his neck. What did you do? I met his fury, with a calm I didn't feel. I erased you. For a second, silence fell. His men shifted uneasily, exchanging wary glances. On the laptop screen behind him, Rachel's captor looked panicked, shouting off camera as sirens wailed faintly in the background. Someone had already tipped off the police. Daniel's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was collapsing in real time. And yet, instead of running, he stepped closer.
Slow.
Dangerous. You think this saves you? His voice dropped to a hiss.
No, Bella.
This is where it ends. He reached behind his back, pulling a sleek pistol from his waistband. The metallic glint of the barrel caught the light as he raised it, aiming squarely at my chest. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I refused to look away. If this was it, I would die staring him in the eye, not begging for mercy. Then bang. The sound cracked like thunder, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. But the pain never came. Daniel staggered. His eyes widened in shock. Blood blossomed across his shirt. He turned slowly, disbelief etched across his face. Behind him stood one of his own men, gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Daniel swayed, choking on his own breath. You, traitor, he gurgled, before collapsing to his knees. The gunman stepped forward, his mask pulled down. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes locked on mine with grim determination. You're Isabella Carter? He asked quickly. I nodded, stunned. I'm not with him. I was never with him, the man said, his voice urgent. I was sent to protect you. And if we don't move now, you're both dead. He jerked his head toward the laptop screen, where Rachel was still tied up, her captor in chaos as police lights flashed through the window. Daniel groaned weakly on the floor, reaching for the gun he dropped. His blood pooled fast, but he wasn't finished yet. And as I stared at his trembling hand inching toward the weapon, I realized this wasn't over. Not yet. Daniel's bloodied hand trembled as it scraped against the cold floor, inching toward the gun. His breath rattled, broken and furious, every inhale sounding like it came from the pit of hell. The stranger, the man who had just shot him, kicked the weapon away and pinned Daniel with his boot. Don't even think about it, he growled. Daniel coughed, spitting red onto the tiles. His eyes burned into mine, defiant even on the edge of death. You think this ends me? He wheezed, clutching his side. Bella, I am the system. Judges, lawyers, police, they all owe me. They'll call you the monster. You'll rot while I walk free. A chill spread through me. Those weren't empty words. He was right. He had bought judges, bribed officials, smeared reputations. He had already twisted the narrative once. He could do it again. The stranger leaned close to me. We don't have time. If you want justice, We finish this here and now. His hand hovered near his holster. One bullet. Clean. I stared at Daniel. This man had killed Alan, destroyed my mother, stolen years of my life. He had turned my love into a battlefield, and now he dared to call himself the victim. He laughed through his blood. Kill me and you prove me right. Everyone will see you as nothing but a greedy widow desperate to hold onto her billions. His cracked lips curved into a sickening smile. The court will paint me as the victim again. His words hit me like knives. If I pulled the trigger, I'd confirm his lie. But if I spared him, would justice ever truly catch him? Rachel's muffled cries echoed from the laptop, reminding me what was at stake. She was still bound, still in danger, still counting on me. I took a slow breath and knelt beside him. No, Daniel, I said softly. You don't get to die by my hand. You don't get to make me into the villain. His eyes flickered. Fear, just for a second. You're going to live, I whispered. But you're going to live to see the world you built burn to ash. Every file, every bribe, every body, they're all out there now. And you'll watch as your empire collapses piece by piece. The stranger looked at me sharply. You're sure? I nodded. Make him survive. That's his punishment. He hauled Daniel upright, cuffing his wrists with zip ties. Daniel roared in protest, thrashing, blood-staining his shirt. No, you can't do this. I made you. I own you. His voice cracked, rage spilling into despair. But the stranger only dragged him toward the waiting black SUV outside. Not anymore. Hours later, I was at the hospital with Rachel. They'd rescued her in time, though she was bruised and shaken. She held my hand so tightly her nails dug into my skin. You did it, she whispered through tears. He's finished. But it wasn't over yet. 3 weeks later, I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding as Daniel shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his wrists chained. The media swarmed, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name. But this time, the story was different. Leaked files had exposed him completely. Offshore accounts drained. Wiretaps proving his bribes. Video of him confessing to Alan's death, dragged out by the digital trap Rachel and I had set. He wasn't just accused, he was condemned by his own empire of corruption. And yet, as the trial began, I heard the words I feared most. The defendant, the judge intoned, claims to be the victim of fraud, manipulation, and attempted murder. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My throat tightened. He was trying again, twisting everything, painting himself as the one betrayed. I stood, unable to stay silent. My voice shook but carried through the chamber. No, Your Honor. I am Isabella Carter. And I am the victim. He stole my husband. He silenced my mother. He tried to erase me for my billions. But the evidence proves he is no victim. He is the predator. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then, one by one, the jurors' eyes shifted, not to him, but to me. The trial dragged for weeks. Every day, Daniel fought, raged, threatened. But every shred of proof tore his mask away. And finally, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Daniel's scream echoed through the chamber as guards dragged him away. His eyes locked on mine one last time, wild with hate, before he vanished behind steel doors. I exhaled, tears stinging my eyes. Justice wasn't perfect, it never would be. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Rachel squeezed my hand. What now? She asked softly. I looked at the sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows. Now, I said, I rebuild. For Alan. For my mother. For every piece of me Daniel tried to destroy. He wanted me erased, but I survived. And as I stepped out into the blinding light, I realized survival wasn't just enough. This was my victory. My revenge. My beginning.